They are in the same order of learning. And unless they share their lessons, they will lack conviction. A good teacher must believe in the ideas which he professes, but he must meet another condition. He must also believe in the students to whom he offers his ideas. Now, humanly speaking, none of you really consistently brings into play the best of being a good teacher. Because for the most part, you tend not to believe in the students to whom you're offering the ideas. You see them as lacking, or negligent, or ignorant, or uncaring, or insensitive, or unwise, and therefore needing your wise counsel to be pumped down their throat so as to turn them into something worthy. That's not called believing in your students. That's not called being a good teacher. A good teacher looks at his brother and sees the Christ there, sees the potential there, and keeps that potential in the foreground as he illuminates ideas. He sees the student as capable of understanding, even though he's currently ignorant. Capable of understanding math, capable of understanding how to reach those fingers around to the right frets on the guitar so that the chord comes out on pitch and clear. He constantly sees the ultimate there as he helps illuminate the student's capacity to let it in and embrace it and own it. Continuing, many stand guard over their ideas because they want to protect their thought system as they are, and learning means change. Change is always fearful to the separated ones because they cannot conceive of it as a change towards healing the separation. They always perceive it as a change towards further separation because the separation was their first experience of change. When you first said, "Father, I'd rather see it my way," and undertook to imaginatively embrace an entirely different interpretation of some part of the kingdom of heaven, you experienced a change. And the first change you experienced was a loss of infiniteness. You experienced the tininess of the stance that you had taken in order to have an idea of your own and apply it to some part of the kingdom of heaven. That was a major change. And as I've said before, the result of that was an uneasy feeling because that stance is unnatural to a child of God, to an expression of God, to the visibility and tangibility of God. And so your ever-present sanity provided a warning, an awareness that this was unnatural. And then you became afraid because you were alone, because you were tiny, because you were separate. And that brought up what you would call an instinct of self-preservation to maintain that isolated point of view and to overcome the fear. So, that was your first experience of change, because change is not normal to the divine state of mind that is the Father's embodied in you. Now, I'm reading again, you believe that if you allow no change to enter into your ego, your soul will find peace. This profound confusion is possible only if one maintains that the same thought system can stand on two foundations, meaning a human and a divine foundation. Nothing can reach the soul from the ego, and nothing from the soul can strengthen the ego or reduce the conflict within it. Well, you say, not even a little bit? No, not even a little bit. If you're not looking toward the altar, you can't see the altar. It's simple. If you're not looking at something, you can't see it. If you have your back to it, you can't see it. And whatever is going on there will not register with you. And so there is no transfer. That's why I brought out last week that there is no such thing as an actually separate ego. There's only the divine one that you are, the Christ that you are, pretending that you aren't the Christ, and suffering from that belief. But everything that the ego seems to be accomplishing, even though it's just an empty packet of imaginative nothing, anything that it seems to accomplish is accomplished by the divine one that you are, by your bringing into play what is real about you while consciously denying that the divine one that you are is doing it. So the ego is never going to really become educated and finally become divine. It's the divine one that you are who wants to go home. It's the divine one that you are that feels the impetus to no longer tolerate suffering because something in you knows that it's illegitimate for you. It is the divine one in you, you could say, returning home, or you could say it's the divine one in you that you are letting come forward more fully in your conscious experience of yourself. The ego, I'm reading again, is a contradiction. In other words, the only thing that can exist in that imaginative nothing is imaginative conflict and nothing else. Man's self, with a small s, and God's capital S self are in opposition. But Father, I'd rather see it my way. That is in opposition to the Father. And everything that follows from your decision to see things your way is going to be conflicted. I'm reading again. They are opposed in creation, in will, and in outcome. They are fundamentally irreconcilable because the soul cannot perceive and the ego cannot know. They are therefore not in communication and can never be in communication. So again, don't think that your ego is becoming enlightened and somehow being transformed so that it will be able to get back into the kingdom of heaven as an actual divine ego. The ego is nothing but an infrastructure of thoughts and ideas that are used to secure even more firmly independence. Continuing. Nevertheless, the ego can learn because its maker can be misguided, but cannot make the totally lifeless out of the life given. The soul need not be taught, but the ego must. Because you're so closely identified with the ego, it will seem to you as though you and ego are making progress and are becoming enlightened. But here's the beauty of it. What's really happening is that the divine one that you are is not being obscured as completely and as skillfully. And the divine one that you are, the Christ that you are right now, is showing up more and more. And in the process, the ego is dissolving. The infrastructures that have held together your so-called authority and your so-called power is yielding, because there's a shift of attention and a shift of intention within you to find that place of excellence in you that is divine, and let it be magnified because you are choosing to love it more than the mutually agreed upon definitions, the ego infrastructures, and the attempt to control because there's a promise of success. Continuing. The ultimate reason why learning is perceived as frightening is because learning does lead to the The ultimate reason why learning is perceived as frightening is because learning does lead to the relinquishment, not destruction, of the ego to the light of the soul. And this is a key point. Waking up is not a matter of destroying the ego. How can you destroy what is nothing but a collection of imaginative thoughts that never had any actual existence? The ultimate reason why learning is perceived as frightening is because learning does lead to the relinquishment, not destruction, of the ego to the light, the capital L light of the soul. This is the change the ego must fear because it does not share my charity. My lesson was like yours, and because I learned it, I can teach it. I never attack your egos. You see, I don't try to destroy your egos. You don't waste your time on nothing. I don't waste my time on nothing. I don't try to get rid of what you think you made out of nothing more than empty packets to which you've added the Christ of you, and you said, oh, there's a real ego. All the while choosing to ignore the fact that you added what was real to nothing and filled the void with that which was real. And that's why it seems like there is something there. I never attack your egos, but I do try to teach you how their thought system, how their infrastructure arose. When I remind you of your true creation, your egos cannot but respond with fear. Teaching and learning are your greatest strengths now, because you must change your mind and help others change theirs. Now, don't let your little egos get too happy here. The only way real change will occur is when you say, Father, what is the truth here? Father, how does this work? Father, even if the way things really work goes against the mutually agreed upon definitions, the ruts that are so well established, even if it's going to make me look like an oddball, I want to know, how do things really work? How can I be in harmony with reality rather than the way I think things ought to be? Continuing, it is pointless to refuse to tolerate change because you believe you can demonstrate that by doing so, the separation has not occurred. You see, well, if I don't allow for change, everything will be perfectly stable. And if everything is perfectly stable, that will be a manifestation of the orderliness and harmony of God. You see. But that's sort of like wanting to get in touch with your guidance and knowing that your mind has to become still. And so you learn to meditate and you learn how to go into the silence. You learn how to experience your mind being still. And then you don't allow any movement whatsoever. When the fact is that communion with your guide, turning toward the altar and inquiring of the Father what the truth is going to mean there will be movement in the stillness. But if you're going to hold everything to perfect silence, disallowing for the movement of God, the movement of love, the movement of truth to register with you, you will not hear anything, and you will not feel the Father's love, and you will not learn anything new. Continuing, the dreamer who doubts the reality of his dream while he is still dreaming is not really healing the level split. You have dreamed of a separated ego. In other words, you've made it up. And you have believed in a world which rests upon it. This is very real to you. You cannot undo this by doing nothing and not changing. When you're suffering, you are experiencing a call for correction. You're experiencing a call for change. When you're going through a crucifixion, having fallen flat on your, not your face, but your derriere, you're experiencing a call for correction, a call for change. And you know what? You know what I want to teach you today? Change is good. Change is something to be desired. Because the change we're talking about will constitute the instantaneous relief and release from suffering. Because you're not reaffirming the mutually agreed upon definitions, the ego infrastructure that can be nothing other than conflicted and unpleasant. This is utterly simple, isn't it? You cannot undo this by doing nothing and not changing. Truth is utterly simple. Continuing, if you are willing to renounce the role of guardian of your thought system and open it to me, I will correct it very gently and lead you home. This is what I said to Helen. This is what I said to Bill. And this is what I say to you. If you are willing to renounce the role of guardian of your thought system, what you've made up, everything that you've made up, and open it to me, I will correct it very gently and lead you home. Because, this is not in the book, because I love you, and you're my brother and my sister, you are fellow Christs, and you and I deserve to be with each other in full recognition of who we are. Every good teacher hopes to give his students so much of his own thinking that they will one day no longer need him. Well, what's the best thinking that I can offer you? The best thinking that I can offer you is whatever encourages you to be willing to abandon the mutually agreed upon definitions and step into the void where you think you don't know the answers because you didn't make them up. So that you might find that the answers are already there and you knew them from the beginning. Those are the best thoughts I can give to you. Dare to step into what your ego calls the unknown, but which to the divine you has always been known, so that you might become once again conscious of what you have always known, and wake up. And don't be afraid of the gargoyles that the ego throws up at you when you do that, and don't be discouraged by the attempts of those around you who would, in their best and greatest caring, encourage you to once again re-embrace the mutually agreed upon definitions, the business infrastructures, the infrastructures of the psychology of relationships and how they work, how they ought to work, that somebody made up. Don't be discouraged when the invitation to come back into the old patterns is made. Continuing, this the hope that one's students will no longer need him, is the one real goal of the parent, teacher, and therapist. This goal will not be achieved by those who believe that they will lose their child or pupil or patient if they succeed. It is impossible to convince the ego of this because it goes against all of its own laws, all of its own infrastructures. But remember that laws, these infrastructures, are set up to protect the continuity of the system in which the lawmaker believes. It is natural enough for the ego to try to protect itself once you have made it, but it is not natural for you to want to obey its laws unless you believe in them. The ego cannot make this choice because of the nature of its origin. In other words, it doesn't have a capacity to make a choice at all because it's been made up out of whole cloth, out of nothing, a little packet of nothing that you poured into space and then added a little or a lot of something real, the divine one that you are, and thus apparently activated these magic invisible crystals of nothing and made something that never existed before and actually doesn't even exist now because the only thing enlivening it is a little bit of something real you added to it while ignoring completely the fact that you added to it something that was real. The ego cannot make this choice because of the nature of its origin. You can make this choice because of the nature of yours. Your origin is the Father. Egos can clash in any situation, but souls cannot clash at all. If you perceive a teacher as merely a larger ego, you will be afraid because to enlarge an ego is to increase separation anxiety. Now, listen to me. I will teach with you and live with you if you will think with me. But my goal will always be to absolve you finally from the need for a teacher. These words are real meanings expressed by me to Helen and Bill, and thereby demonstrate or embody, quote, in the world, unquote, my function with everyone. That's what makes this course valuable. Not how the words are put together. Not whether they're put together so beautifully that they'll withstand the test of time in a library of great books. But because it conveys to you a relationship that's real, a relationship that arises out of my love for you. Not puny little pissant egos, but the Christ that each one of you is right now. And that's escaping your notice. And you deserve for it not to escape your notice. It's too wonderful not to be conscious of.